Central C went from a relatively unknown artist to being one of the top artists. Central C made one decision that changed him from being an underground, unknown rapper to topping the charts in the UK with over 30 million monthly listeners. This is the story of Central C. Central C, aka Cench, aka Oakley, was born on June 4th of 1998 and would end up growing up in Shepherd's Bush, London. Something really interesting about Shepherd's Bush is it had areas of extreme poverty next to high wealth. So the broke kids would have to walk around their neighborhood, they would see these really nice apartments and houses and know that they didn't have that to come home to. While some people would be a bit discouraged by this, it seemed like Central had the mentality that everything that he ever wanted would be well within his reach because he could just drive down the road and see it all. With that being said, he would grow up with his 3 younger brothers and just his mother, and it wouldn't take long for him to feel like he had the responsibility to take care of his younger brothers. His father wasn't fully absent from his life because he would visit him multiple times while he was younger, and this would put Cench onto artists such as Tupac, Biggie, G-Unit, and Wu-Tang Clan, and his love for these artists through hearing his father play them all the time would lead to him starting producing music at just the age of 8 years old. As far as I know, this is the youngest I've heard of any artist actually producing music, but Cench is just different. 6 years later, at the age of 14, Cench would actually start making music as the lead artist, actually doing the vocals for his tracks. And just a year later, one of his friends who actually had access to a studio would invite Cench over, and this would be a huge awakening for Cench. In this studio session, Central would make the best song he had ever made up until this point. He would learn a bit about distribution and how you can get your music spread really quickly, and with this, he would come to the conclusion that blowing up isn't that far-fetched of a dream, and that it's actually a real possibility. Now, with these early songs, he would start off by just showing it to some of his closer friends, and then as he started to get a little more comfortable with it, he would start really releasing them, but a lot of these tracks are now deleted. Between this time when he was 15 years old, all the way until the time he was 21 years old, he would end up working a lot on this auto-tune melodic style of music that was really popular in London. And towards the later stages of it, he was getting enough traction that managers would be reaching out to him, but he didn't really like many of them. They would make promises that he knew they couldn't guarantee, so he felt as though they were kind of lying through their teeth just to get him to sign the dotted line. That was until there was one manager who had a completely different approach. He approached Central and he said, "Listen, I'm not the most experienced as a manager, but I will outwork all these other people. I'm a quick learner, and I will be the best option as a manager for you." Central respected the transparency and ended up signing this manager of the name YB's. YB's would push Central C to take music more seriously and to pick one track that he really believed in and promote it to see how it did. Central didn't agree with this idea though, because he felt as though he didn't quite have a song worthy of being promoted like that. This would be a problem that lasted months, and while Central was trying to think of what he wanted to do, eventually he started to have the idea of maybe ditching the melodic sound that he had been working on for 7 years at the time. Ditching this style would be extremely risky, and he didn't know what exactly to go with at the time, so he ended up just continuing as usual all the way until October of 2019, when he had this mixtape madness that would get some people's attention when he ditched the autotune. In this mixtape madness video, he would start off with the typical autotune he had been doing for 7 years up until that point, and then the second half he would completely cut the vast majority of it and go to this style that was a bit more traditional that fans haven't really heard him do. This got some people's attention. The contrast was highlighted because, again, the first half was autotune, the second half wasn't, and people had some positive feedback for him. The next few months, he would throw out some Instagram freestyles. Those would get some people's attention, and in June of 2020, he decided to drop a track called A Day in the Life.
Day in the life, let's see if you really trap. Turn off the auto-tune, let's hear how you really rap.
Day in the Life would put Cench on a lot of people's radars, including Big Sean, and it seemed like almost everybody who listened to the song really enjoyed the bar that he put out saying, "Turn off the auto-tune, let's see how you really rap." Funny that someone transitioning from doing melodic rap for about 7 years would say this, but he did it flawlessly. He went from the melodic sound, again, that he had been doing for 7 years up until this point, to a completely different style, and it sounded really good. With this song doing numbers, Central knew that he had to take advantage, but as this was a brand new sound to him, he had nothing in his discography that quite sounded like it. So he had to rush to the studio, and a month later would drop his second song that would be his only hope for not looking like a one-hit wonder, Molly. After changing his style, his first song went viral, this second song called Molly also went viral, and he also, just another month later, would end up putting out a Mad About Bars video, which also went viral. He was 3 for 3 in 3 months, and 2 months later, he would try to do it again with a song called Loading. This song would be his most viral yet, would get a lot of people's attention, and this would be the point where a lot of artists, if they hadn't already, would have signed to a label. Central C at this point had already doubled down on himself 4 or 5 times. There's no doubt that the deals had only been going up until this point, but Sench decided to bet on himself once more and put out a mixtape months later. This mixtape would be called Wild West. Now, real quick, I want to be very clear. I've made a lot of videos on a lot of artists, and I've also looked into a lot of artists that I didn't make videos on. I don't think I've ever seen, maybe it's less than 1% of the time, that an independent artist and a small team or his team of just him and his manager pretty much do such a successful rollout that in their first week of a mixtape or an album, it did significant chart numbers. But Central C isn't like 99% of other artists. He had a really good marketing strategy. The first thing he did is he got a deal with Trapstar where he would sell his merch through Trapstar, one of the biggest clothing brands in the UK, which the founders of it were from Central C's area, so they were willing to work with him. He made a deal with them. Again, already a very popular clothing brand. So his merch would be sold with them. Fans could come in and non-fans could come in and accidentally buy his merch. But with his merch came a copy of the album. So this would boost his numbers dramatically, again, even from some people who weren't fans of him. On top of that, they had this really simple strategy, but really effective strategy of having all orange everything for the rollout of the album. You would see the album had orange on it. He would be wearing orange in everything he posted at the time. He would be taking pictures around all orange Lamborghinis. It was everywhere. If you saw the color orange after a little bit, you would probably start thinking of Central C. It was just that effective. But even on top of that, this upcoming, super entertaining, the super exciting artist would do impromptu shows throughout London. And these would have tremendous turnouts. I mean, fans would be showing up like crazy. All of this adding hype. Once you see a huge group of people, you have to ask, what is going on there? People posting it on their stories all over. Wild West was getting a lot of attention before it was even released. And when it was released, it would peak at number 2 on the UK charts. Now, I do want to stress, if you were from the UK, I'm not from the UK, obviously, but if you were from there, I would imagine it was very difficult to not hear about this album if you were even somewhat interested in music. And with that being said, this album, the majority of the songs would get over 10 million streams. Remember, this is an independent artist. He doesn't have to give away much of the royalties at all. He made 10 million streams on the majority of the songs on the 14-track album, and he would also end up winning multiple awards at the Mobos. Now, again, crazy to see a brand new exploding artist do this, but in his acceptance speech, he seemed as though he was just a regular guy who didn't really care for the awards. He appreciated it, but this is what he actually had to say.
I appreciate it a lot, man. I don't know how I feel about award shows, to be fair. I don't know if it really excites me, but if there was one that I'd appreciate accepting an award from, it would be the Mobos. So thank you very much.
I have to say, I don't think I've ever seen a young, talented, exploding artist refuse to acknowledge the success they have like Central C did. I don't know if he just doesn't care at all. It seems so authentic and genuine. He blew up. He doesn't care to really celebrate his success. He said in multiple interviews he doesn't party, and he's not that social of a guy. He doesn't like doing interviews. It seems like he's a guy who's just going to sit at home and continue working on his craft. A young, talented artist who isn't going to celebrate his success seems like a very dangerous recipe, because if it's all about the music, there's nothing slowing him down. And this would lead to him releasing another mixtape called 23 in February of the next year. At this point, people already knew what he was capable of to a degree, but they just wanted to see if he could kind of hold on to the momentum and really have another good rollout. Like, what if the first one was a fluke, and what if all the 5 singles before that just, you know, were a fluke, or the gimmick of the sales with the merch or something like that? There was plenty that could have been inflating the value of Central C, but he would end up leading this album with a very successful single called Obsessed With You.
I hope a trap boys your type. Why? Cause I don't have a 9 to 5.
At this point, Central C did it again. He dropped another album, but this time it went #1 on the UK charts for R&B albums, for independent albums. He monopolized the whole thing. It was absolutely crazy. And on top of this, he completely solidified that he belonged here. And also something worth mentioning, it was impossible to understand how he did it. Again, he was like an overnight success after 7 years because he changed his sound. Changing his sound to something he was not comfortable with, that he had not done before, was what exploded him into the mainstream. This might be the case for so many other artists, where just taking a chance could absolutely explode your career, and I hope if you're an artist, you take that into consideration. With that being said, once again, Central wasn't done, and there was more work to do. In July, Central would put up his biggest single, I believe, to this date. He would have a Cole Bennett video, being the first UK artist to be on Lyrical Lemonade, combined with some absolutely eye and ear catching bars. This song was called Doja.
The man them celebrate Eid, the trap still running on Christmas Day. Somebody told Doja Cat.
This song was impossible to not hear after its release. It completely took over TikTok. Even in America, it was getting attention just because he had the Doja Cat bar, and also because Lyrical Lemonade is a huge platform in America. This would make him go a little bit more worldwide than he ever had before, and he had already had some tendencies to try to take over certain parts of Europe every once in a while. At this point, he was at the peak of his career, and that kind of leads us to where he is today, where he's allegedly considering signing with the label. Maybe he is. That might delay an album or a mixtape or anything from him, but there's no doubt that he's getting a bag if he does sign, and if he doesn't sign, his royalties are more than enough to live off at this point. But based on everything we see, there's no reason to believe that Central is going to slow down. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Will he continue the success? Is he going to fall off? I doubt it, but thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy.